we are so back. I mean, my camera might not be, but we are back, ladies and gents, because the Hotspur Huddle is full underway on this fine Wednesday evening. The gang are all back together. So let's go around the table. Let's say a hello. So Wes, great to have you back. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, it's been a while. I don't know what happened in the month of February, but it just felt like we couldn't get anything going for one reason or another. We tried our best, people, but it's just meant that we've got loads to catch up on, I guess, in tonight's show. So yeah, it should be a good one. And yeah, very much looking forward to being back.
Indeed, and we're back in a different kind of setting because hopefully this is going to be better than the last one. But Nelson, it's great to have you back as well. How are you?
I'm good. As you can see, I've moved into my new place, so the camera lighting is looking nice. I'm feeling good. And we've essentially this season, the Hotspur Huddle, we've had our winter break, and now we're back. So we're back from our little holiday and back raring to go. So I'm glad to be back, man.
Oh yes, I'm very excited for this one. Obviously, as we know, this show is sponsored by Kofa and True Holly Fashion. She's not organised with the little ads, so Wes, I'm going to let you fire away with everything that Kofa is.
Yeah, so Kofa or Kickoff Football Academy Milton Keynes run lots and lots of different football sessions in the Milton Keynes area, helping young boys and girls along their footballing journey. So if anybody is in and around Milton Keynes and has a young budding footballer, the next Dele Alli, the next Kevin Danso, the next Leah Williamson, please send them our way because we'd love to help them.
I love how now, Wes, the amount of players that have come from MK is just full flowing. I'm loving it, and
Listen,
many from
listen.
Kofa as well.
Listen, I could reel off a whole host of names that have come out of Milton Keynes, and I mean, people may not have heard of all of them, but you've got even the Baldock brothers, George Williamses, Shea Ojo. Like there is a hell of a lot of players that have come from Milton Keynes. Brendan Galloway, who's at Plymouth. You've got Giorgio Rizzulo, who many people may not know, but he was actually one of the youngest players to play for England schoolboys once upon a time. So yeah, the talent factory in my ends is endless. And yeah, I guess I'm just here trying to help that next generation of young ballers coming through. And yeah, let me tell you, there is some serious talent in Milton Keynes that's coming through at the moment.
Lovely stuff. So if you want to be a part of that, make sure you go check out Kofa and go see the good work that Wes is doing over there. But without further ado, let's kick things off. Obviously, it's been a little while, Wes, since we've spoken Tottenham together. So what obviously did you make of the City game? It's a little while ago now, but what did you make of it?
Yeah, I think there's a reason why it's been a while since we've spoken Tottenham. It's not been good. It's not been looking good, bruv. No, City game. Frustrating, annoying. But listen, I think it was the 115th time of asking that City have finally beaten us. So yeah, I think it was nice to kind of give them, a win. It's not something that usually happens. I think And was probably right though in his assessment of the game, where he said we probably did everything, obviously, but put the ball in the back of the net. But honestly, I read the team out and read the subs bench out, and I turned to my dad and went, "This is City in a crisis." By the way, like it was an actual joke. The players they could just call upon off the bench. Like I think Pep brought on 200 million in one hit in one sort of substitution window, and you're just going, "Geez!" Like City's bench that night could have started for every other team in the Premier League. Do you know how mad that is? Do you know how mad that is to just call upon Bernardo Silva, Jack Grealish, De Bruyne, Foden, Gundogan, and you go in? How on earth can anyone compete with that? It's just mad. But no, it wasn't one of those defeats where we're going, oh my god, we played so bad for a change. I think the lads sort of gave everything, but we're just sort of lacking that cutting edge in the final third.
Yeah, and I think it's like you say, the Hoodoo's kind of finished now. It's a bit devastating because we were kind of their bogey team for a very long time. But Nelson, obviously it's been a little while since we've talked about Arsenal as well. And luckily for you, obviously while we were off, you had that draw and you had that loss to West Ham and a red card. So what have you kind of made of Arsenal's performance?
We've been all over the shop, in my opinion. I just think we haven't been. I think the losses, I think the injuries have, I think they've piled up. I think the players are now feeling that. What's funny is that I think we are so good defensively, but I think the loss of Martinelli and a Saka and a Havertz, as much as Arsenal fans will say, you know what, the Havertz isn't as a convincing striker. We're not in that dressing room. We don't know what it feels like to lose, your star man like Bukayo Saka. Like the players know how it feels, so I think that is reflected in the performances. I think as fans, you can say that Arsenal are still great defensively, and maybe we can still create a couple of chances, but you can tell that the morale is low. And obviously, with last night's Champions League, which we'll talk about in a moment. I think in the league in particular, I think it's not been a very good last few weeks. So I think, in my opinion, I always hate the international break. But from an Arsenal perspective, I can't wait for the international break to arrive because it might give some players some rest. So that is my take on Arsenal so far, Holly.
I was going to say, keep it short and sweet because I know when we talk about obviously that win last night, it will probably be a little bit longer than me and Wes will like. But Wes, we'll turn our attention obviously to our kind of European campaign facing AZ
Mhm.
on Thursday. So, how are you
Mhm.
kind of feeling for that one?
Yeah, I'm feeling good about it. I think that's because I've seen who was on the plane heading over there. So obviously, Cootie's back, Mickey's back, Dom Solanke's back, and my word, did we miss him on Wednesday? He'd have had an absolute field day. Dominic Solanke. He's like the player that you didn't know your team and that you needed until he arrived. And I think he's been a huge miss for Tottenham. And yeah, I think now we're getting players back. We can kind of go and assess our chances and our situation a little bit better because we're not going, well, we're going to have to stick the kids like Archie Gray at centre half again, and we're going to have to play Bergvall, who's been literally like the Swedish Luka Modric last few weeks. He's been outrageous as Bergvall. So yeah, I think now we've got the experience back. I'm hoping that should count for something, and I think it will against RZ. Obviously, they had a fantastic result in the last round. I believe it was against Galatasaray. And obviously, we know how difficult a place that is to go and get a result. So, listen, they're no mugs. We're going to have to be at it. But I would anticipate over 2 legs that we get the job done. I'll be very disappointed if we don't.
I mean, talking about getting the job done, Nelson, I was kind of a bit gobsmacked with the scoreline. I'm not going to lie. Yesterday, what did you make of that game? Probably like a bit of breath of fresh air after obviously what we spoke about previously.
Seven heaven is all I have to say. It was so good, so good. It was Holly, I don't think many Arsenal fans expected that result last night. I don't think any neutrals expected that result last night. So for Arteta to go out and put that team and for the players to get the job done essentially, because if if PSV come to the Emirates and pull off, I don't know what, a crazier miracle than Barcelona, then yeah, you're looking at probably a sacking in my opinion. But yeah, I don't think many of football fans just expected that result yesterday, and I think the players should be very happy with that performance. I think PSV were very poor. I was very surprised by how they came out because I'm a big fan of Wes. Me and Wes talk about Dutch football a lot, and PSV Eindhoven have been really good this season, and I've been very impressed with them, especially in Europe. And to get that result against Juventus in particular, I was thinking they were going to come with a bit more fire, and I was very disappointed. They were a bit lackluster. They didn't show enough grit, and I think their fans will be very disappointed with their performances. But again, in a way, any competition you've got to beat what's in front of you. That's what we did. So I think looking to the second leg, I think a benefit of a win with that huge of a impact and significant as 7-1 allows Arteta to rest some players ahead of some the fixtures kind of piling up over the next few weeks, especially when you stay in competitions like Europa and FA Cup, the fixtures pile up. So he will be very happy with that result. The fans will be, and it will allow some players to obviously get back to full fitness. And who knows? Obviously, our sights are set on Madrid. I don't know which one, but in my opinion, I have said that Atletico would probably pose more of a problem than Real Madrid, not because of the players and only because of Simeone and how Simeone sets up his side. And I think Wes would agree from a coaching perspective, he has set up probably the lowest of blocks you could imagine. And I think as an Arsenal fan, that would be very hard to, even if we had Saka and Martinelli, I would still find Atletico more difficult to break down than Real Madrid, who I think Ancelotti has just decided to pick the best players from the lunchroom and decided, hey, boys, go out there, kick a ball and win the game sort of thing, quite open football. But, it works. And in Europe, I think Real Madrid have been Champions League winners, 15 times, 14, 15 times for a reason. And they just know how to get the job. Chaos football, I like to call it. Organized chaos football at Madrid. But we'll have to wait and see. But I think Arteta will be very pleased. And a great result last night.
Yeah, it was, sadly. That's me with my level-headed on. But it kind of leads us on, because obviously we are nearly 2/3 of the season, or over 2/3 of the season, I'm not very good at maths, through obviously this season so far. So, Wes, obviously talking about that shock result yesterday, are there any teams that have shocked you for the right reasons or the wrong reasons so far this season?
I'll start with the right reason. I think it's probably clear from everybody, Nottingham Forest, especially given Nuno, who was supposed to make us proud. He's making Forest proud instead. I don't think anybody could foresee that coming. I've really liked the look of Bournemouth this year. They've been brilliant. And I think I mentioned it on the Park Lane podcast on Sunday. Their recruitment and the way they've recruited players has been absolutely outstanding, like outstanding. So credit to Bournemouth. I've liked the look of Ipswich at times, but you can still sense that they're still a bit naive and a bit new to Premier League football, and you can sense that in some of the decision making that they make on and off the ball. And obviously, from a perspective of disappointing seasons, obviously I'm throwing us Tottenham into there. I think everybody was expecting us to really kick on and sort of hit top four this year. Obviously, I don't think anybody was going to foresee the amount of injuries that we were going to have at one time. United as well just are a complete and utter mess. But from top to bottom, they have not got a clue. I mean, if anybody's enjoying the downfall, then you are a sick human being. So I'm going to throw myself into that category of being a sick human being because it's brilliant. So yeah, I'd probably say from a positive point of view, like I say, Bournemouth, Forest, Ipswich to a certain degree, because I think there's an identity with Ipswich that you can see. I don't think you can see that with the other teams sort of in and around there. And then obviously from a disappointing point of view, I'd definitely go us and United really, and maybe to a certain degree West Ham potentially, but I think they've tried something and it hasn't worked, and I think they can at least sort of turn around and say, okay, we've tried to go down this route and this approach. Okay, it hasn't worked. We're going to revert effectively back to type. So I think next year I'll be expecting a little bit more potentially from West Ham, because Potter's got his feet under the table there. So it'll be interesting to see what they do next season in particular.
I think that's the thing now. We can kind of weigh it up with, not this season's done because there's still a lot of games to go, but you can kind of see what some teams are projected to be like. I mean, Nelson, is there any you want to throw into the mix that are different to Wes? Are you on the same kind of wavelength?
Yeah, I think I'm on the same kind of wavelength. I think Forest and Bournemouth are the two standouts for me. So Wes kind of hit the nail on the head. Another team I want to throw in there is, I feel like this team has been, this from a disappointing point of view, is obviously Wes knows South London, Palace. Palace for me have been very disappointing. I think the expectations we had from them, considering how they finished last season, we had quite high hopes for them. Mateta kind of hitting form as they're getting back to full fitness, and the fact that they added a person who I think, Eddie Nketiah, is a poacher of a striker. You're thinking, okay, they're starting to link up, and obviously in January they brought I think the kid from Millwall as well. I just think they've been very disappointing. Obviously, they've had a good run of fixtures lately, but I think that start of the season, I think, is what has made them stay 12th. Otherwise, I think we're talking about Palace really fighting for the Europa League spots if they had started really well this season. Brighton is another team as well because they had a bad patch of form and they've slowly just picked up. points. Is it Hertzler? How you pronounce his
Yeah,
name?
yeah.
I've been very impressed with him as a coach. I think that at times he's got it wrong, but I've been very impressed with how he set up Brighton, and I have to give him a shout out. But I don't think there's much I can throw into the mix there, Holly. I'm trying to think. I mean, United is. I'm with Wes, and I'm joining. I'm a sick person. I love watching their downfall. It's been amazing. And also want to give one more shout out in terms of the last few 6 or 7 weeks. Considering if they had David Moyes at the start of the season, who knows where Everton could have ended up? And I think Everton have to get a real shout here because my mate from work is a big Everton fan, and he's just spoken about how Dyche just doesn't seem to be progressive at all, and Moyes has just come in, and I was actually quite skeptical. I thought he was going to go backwards, but credit to Moyes, he's come in and he's dealt with everything so well. And Everton are in a good run of form. So I think Everton's the only other team I'd throw into the mix. But disappointments, you lot are top only because I think after finishing fifth, I really was expecting you guys to kick on, and it just hasn't happened. So next season, hopefully with injuries, injury free and stuff, I think you guys are probably expecting a much better season. Because I mean, to say a statement like "I win everything in my second season" is huge, and I think he's kicked himself in the arse there by doing that. So hopefully next year, he kind of gets it back. I don't know, who knows, but that's all I have to add to kind of the positives and the disappointments from the season.
I was going to say, because you spoke about a certain individual, obviously with Moyes coming in and doing well for Everton. So Nelson, I'm gonna throw this one back to you in case Wes has exactly the same answer, so you can actually add something to the mix this time. But for you, is there kind of on an individual level, is there any players that have shocked you in terms of how well they've done, or how much of a kind of impact they could have had but haven't really shone?
Oh, that is a question. Okay, I thought you were gonna ask me about like who's shy, like who's. Oh, you really threw me under the bus. I'm trying to think. This is a big one. Okay. If I'm thinking of players throughout the league, I'm probably gonna start at the top of the table and say the likes of a Cole Palmer, like just because I think he set himself huge heights last season, and I don't think he's lived. And I don't think maybe he's had a couple of injuries here and there. And I think Maresca's tried to tinker with different formations, especially with Nkunku and João Felix at the start of the season. Um, but to answer your question, because I think Cole Palmer's kind of harsh, I'm gonna go for the £100 million man at City because I think Grealish, in my opinion, he's been in my head for quite a while simply because we saw the levels that he hit with Villa and the freedom that he had. And for me, I just feel like his time at City is done. I think he could have taken advantage with the crisis that City are in and actually shine. And now that the fact they've brought Marmoush in, I think is a sign that Grealish's time at City is done. So he's someone from kind of the top six that sticks out from the top of my head who hasn't really shone. And then from the bottom half of the table, I'm going to go to Ipswich. I was really hoping Amari Hutchinson would like kick on in this. Like, I don't know why it hasn't kind of worked out. Obviously, the team haven't done overall really well. But I think I think most people, if they mention Ipswich, they would say that the Lap has been the star standout this season. But I was really hoping that Amari Hutchinson would be the one to shine because he had a stellar season in a championship last year and it just hasn't happened this year. So those are my two. But that's a great question, Holly. I don't. Wes could add some more into the mix, but those are my two that's from the top of my head. And I might put my hand up if there's any more that I've got.
This is why I should stick to my script. Look, I'm going to throw that question at you now. You've had a bit of time. I feel really bad now, so I probably just shoved Nelson under the bus. Whereas now you've got a bit of time to kind of think about it. So go for it. Who's your kind of player?
I think the player that's really impressed me, Liam Delap. He is literally like another Harry Kane. He has everything about him that screams Harry Kane. I say that I'm hoping the more dropping deep, pinging it, that's going to come from Liam Delap. But in terms of back to goal, centre forward play, he has been absolutely superb. Like I was at Portman Road a couple of weeks ago, and every time the ball went long, it was just a quick look over the shoulder. He pinned himself on Archie Gray, which is then really intelligent, knowing your players, knowing your opponent, and he just got in front, either flicked it on or just got his body in between and just held it up. He's been phenomenal for me, and regardless of what happens to Ipswich, he gets a move in the summer for me. I'll be really, really shocked if Ipswich stay up and he stays, and I'll be even more shocked if he stays if Ipswich go down. So that one for me, I think Isak has gone to another level this year. I want to say in terms of this season, standalone season, I think he's overtaken Haaland in terms of the best centre forward in the Premier League, just off this season alone. I think Salah is aging like a fine wine. It's amazing what happens when you get a fresh trim. So yeah, Salah's been phenomenal. So I'd probably go those three. In terms of players that have really disappointed me, Eze, I've been ridiculously disappointed. I was expecting him to kick on, and obviously he had a bit of an impact at the Euros, and it's as if now he's kind of seen his mates move, and he's like, "I'm still here, by the way. Like, is anyone going to come for me?" And it didn't happen, which I think was to the shock of the Palace chairman, Steve Parish. And I just don't feel like he's hit those heights that we know he can, and not produced enough in the way that we know that he can. So yeah, I think that's the big sort of standout player for me. I also think Kobbie Mainoo, put it this way, if he played for Wolves, he would not be an England player. He's getting into the England squad because he's at Man United. I mean, and I think there's some good bits about Kobbie Mainoo, don't get me wrong, but the hype is ridiculous for for what you're actually seeing. So like the actual product on the pitch, in terms of what you see, is nowhere near how hyped up he gets. I actually think Odegaard has been quite poor as well. I know he scored last night, but I think that was only his 4th goal of the season, I want to say, last night. You're expecting a lot more from a player that is held in such high regard. But yeah, I also agree with Nelson on Jack the Lad Grealish. It's not so much that the shackle, he's been like caged at City. I just don't think he was ever going to reproduce what he was doing at Villa, because he was the big fish in the small pond at Villa, if you like, and he had the freedom to do everything, take the game by the scruff of the neck, etc., etc. And I mean, you're looking at Villa now, and they could potentially do with somebody like a Jack Grealish, to be fair, operating in one of those 10 positions just off the front line. But it's like he's gone in at City, and it's Jack Grealish. Okay, all right, don't care. You got a job to do here, and he's not really. It's almost felt like he's gone, I've made it now. I've secured my bag. I know I'm going to win some trophies, and that's it. And he's plateaued massively, to the point where I don't even think the girls are talking about his calves anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you know what I mean? It's getting that deep. Like, nobody speaks about Jack Grealish anymore. That's how drastic the fall off is. Because there was a time every week, you'd be on podcasts, or you'd watch Sky Sports News, for example. You'd be talking about Jack Grealish. It's not there now. And I think his time, as Nelson was quite right, his time at City's done. And I think he'll be out the door if anybody can afford his wages. If not, he's probably going out to Saudi, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of you are kind of right. I mean, Nelson, is there anybody else you've kind of thought of while Wes was thinking? Come back to you.
Come back to me, because I was thinking of the disappointments, but in terms of positives, I think Wes is right. It was so funny because me and Wes have a mutual friend, more on Wes' side, who mentioned at one point that Darwin Núñez was the best striker in the league.
Oh, I knew that was coming.
And we were like, wait, what? And at that point, we were talking about Erling, and he compared him to Erling Haaland, and he's a Liverpool fan, and it was quite biased. But even me and Wes, as North London fans, we're like, what are you talking about? Haaland's the best player Haaland's the best striker in the league. But this season, standalone levels in terms of what you want from a striker, pure silk and beautiful. Isak is the one for me. So he was a standout player for me this season, as well as Salah. But I've had some other standout players that I'm going to quickly just name off. Bryan Mbeumo has been very impressive for Bournemouth this season. I think he's taken on I think, as was mentioned, big fish in a small pond with Brentford. Tony's gone, and I think he's taken that really well. Another person, again, down the bottom half of the table has been Mateus Cunha. He has been phenomenal for Wolves this season. It's clear that, again, similar to Liam Delap, I think if they go down, I'd be very surprised if he stays in the Championship. He deserves a move. And another person, which Wes did do this, which I have to give credit to, is the original OG celebration, Morgan Rogers. Because, yeah, Morgan Rogers, for me, I think, he's just like he's a hybrid of defensive. He's just got everything. He's the whole package. And that game this season, that when they played Arsenal, I think was his best game I've ever seen him play. I think he just bullied and bullies. We're talking top class midfielders, and for me, he's been, like, you could say, a most improved player. But I think seeing his journey where he's kind of been to kind of come to Villa and then just smash it, and him have no shame in saying that he used to play for West Brom and doesn't mind playing for Villa, I think sums up his attitude. But those are my players, Holly. There's a lot more that we could name, but obviously those are the standouts from today.
I'm pretty sure when we do our end of season awards, we can ring off loads of other names as well, and
Yeah.
probably go over those players again, which I'm kind of looking forward to. So that should be good. I mean, hopefully there is a few more shows before then. But let's kind of move on.
That depends on you, Holly. To be fair,
Yeah,
let's
true,
not get
to
it
be
twisted.
Yeah, all right, fairs. I'll hold my hands up. I'll see if I'm free, but I'm sure I will be. But obviously, I want to talk about what Jamie Carragher said I can't even remember what it was now. But Wes, I come to you because obviously it's not the first time that Mr. Carragher said something a little bit or done something a little bit controversial that's caused a little bit of a talking point. So I'll let you fire away with what your kind of thoughts of when he spoke about obviously the AFCON Cup of Nations.
Yeah, so if anybody was living under a rock, Jamie Carragher almost dismissed the AFCON competition and used it as a reason as to why Salah's not really spoken about in the Ballon d'Or conversations. And he kind of used the AFCON tournament to say, because it's not a major tournament, he kind of gets overlooked. Really, really interesting, because I think there's always been this perception from people in Europe that AFCON, Copa America, Gold Cup, they're sort of lesser tournaments, which I think is really unfair, because effectively those tournaments are the exact equivalent of a Euros. You could argue the quality of player perhaps in every single nation isn't as high, but that shouldn't disregard the actual tournament itself, because obviously it's not the country's fault. They're producing what they believe is the best that they can. But I mean, if you look at players that have come out of African nations over the years, you would have a really strong like AFCON team, to be honest. You look at sort of our era growing up, you had like Drogba, Essien, players of that ilk, Stephen Apaya, Kolo and Yaya Toure, players that are held in like really, really high regard. And obviously now you can throw Salah into the mix in there. And I think, it was massively controversial. I don't think it was sort of needed. I think it's just a case of Salah probably gets overlooked because of Champions League performance, because Liverpool and you look at Salah's numbers and you go, yeah, 100% deserves it. But then you look at where Liverpool get to in terms of Champions League. Like, yes, they've been in finals a couple of times, but if they're not getting into like semis or a final, they tend to get knocked out fairly early. And then Salah would probably kick on from that point onwards. So I think the Champions League does have a massive bearing on the Ballon d'Or. Obviously, World Cups, Salah's not getting as many opportunities, so to speak, as a Vinicius Junior or an Mbappe, to play in a World Cup because of his nation. Like, it's not Salah's fault, because he's probably carrying that nation on his shoulders. But yeah, I just felt it was a little bit unnecessary, really, from Carragher to pinpoint that tournament as a contributing factor to why Salah doesn't get mentioned in Ballon d'Or conversations. But I think this time round, it's looking a hell of a lot different. So I think there's going to be definitely some inquests going on if Salah isn't at least, for me, in the top 5 minimum for the Ballon d'Or this year.
Like you say, it's not Carragher. I mean, he says silly things all the time, doesn't he, Nelson? But what was your kind of take? Because I've heard that recently, like since then, he's come out and said something to kind of go back on what his word was. But what was your kind of take on it when you first heard it, and then obviously his not excuse for saying it, but what he said afterwards as well?
I think in regards to what he said, which I think was last night, I didn't really hear much, but I remember after all the backlash that he received, after saying it on Sky Sports, and Micah and Daniel Sturridge kind of like correcting him in that moment, he did come out on Twitter and try to, state his reasons as to why, which I think Rio Ferdinand, if anybody after this pod wants to go watch a clip of Rio Ferdinand, it's like a 2-minute clip. He explains essentially what Carragher is trying to say, but didn't point out really well, because there was, like Wes has said, there's no need to kind of devalue the competition of AFCON, because if you go and ask the players in the ilk of Didier Drogba and Samuel Eto'o what it means to win the AFCON, they will passionately tell you why. And I saw another thing the other day, which for me is a bit sad to realize, that the perception of AFCON and tournaments like an Asian Cup or a Gold Cup or a Copa America, I think outlines something bigger that happens in society, what people's perceptions are of a continent like Africa or South America, which is a bit unfortunate. So you hope that in the future, like especially like Wes mentioned, the Champions League kind of being probably the biggest factor in deciding how the Ballon d'Or is kind of decided. I think FIFA need to look into, or not FIFA, or whoever like judges the Ballon d'Or. I think it needs to be looked into, because I think you need to make it fair to consider everything that players have won. If you're trying to rank who is the best player in the world, I think Sadio Mane finished second by winning the AFCON with Senegal. So I think for Carragher to say that doesn't play a factor, I think is wrong, because if Sadio Mane was that close, then clearly the AFCON does mean something. And at the same time, I think you're looking at a bigger issue when you're talking about the structure of the federations in Africa as well, because if there was a bit more structure, which I think John Obi Miguel has said quite a lot on this podcast about, the unstructured nature of, matches and pitches and things being affected for African players. If things were in place, you're probably having a really larger conversation, which I've mentioned to Wes, and we've spoken about off the record, about players playing for their countries where their parents were born, rather than where they were raised. We're talking about players who could play for Jamaica, players who could play for Congo, players who could play for Nigeria. The list is endless. So for Carragher to say what he said, I think just shows a lot of ignorance. It was very ignorant from him. I know Joey Barton has come out. We know what Joey Barton's like, but Joey Barton has gone on and said some more things to support Carragher. But yeah, I think it's just very sad, because I think what Carragher has said, and for him to say it on the platform of a Sky Sports, is a reflection of, I think he has said what the majority have thought for quite a long time. And if the majority are thinking that and have now seen what the backlash has been since Carragher said that, they need to understand that essentially Africa don't really care what he says, and they know that they're a big tournament. And at the end of the day, I think it's just about hopefully teaching others what AFCON, what any other competitions like the Copa America or a Gold Cup means to the players, because it's a big thing. But I wasn't surprised when he made that comment. I think a lot of people weren't surprised, because it's Jamie Carragher at the end of the day. And despite the vibes that they've brought to us at CBS, this goes to show, look, you are one word away from being a bellend. So just be careful what you say. So that's my take on it, Ollie.
Absolutely preach. We can end that show on Carragher's a bellend. And I quite like that. But obviously, before we go, we will talk a little bit about FPL. I won't get our teams up, because I always am embarrassed every week, because I forget to do it, and then we're sat here talking about the same thing that Holly needs to put players in, and I don't do it. So instead, we're just going to talk about tactics now, because we do have international break coming up, which means there might be a lot of swap and changing. So Wes, I'm going to go with you first. Have you got any thoughts in mind, or have you got any tips and tricks that you've learned through this process of being like, I need to beat Holly in the league? So far away.
Yeah, mind the gap, Holly. But no, I think the biggest thing is obviously learning to target the right players for the right games. So I'm just having a look at my team here. It looks like Liverpool have got Southampton as their next game. Chelsea have got Leicester. So those are potentially some teams where you could target some players. But yeah, it's just sometimes it can be luck of the draw. I mean, I had it like the last game week where, you know, my bench near enough outperformed my starting team. I know Nkunku had a worldie because I put him in because they were playing Southampton. He picked up 12 points. Did I captain him or vice captain him? Hell no. But then I look at my bench and it's like Alisson got me 6 points. My goalkeeper Bernd Leno got me 3. I had Anthony Robinson in, didn't get me any points. Trent got me 6. Minos got me 4. Trent got more points and he's on my bench than my whole back 3 put together, which also included Kirkes and Huijsen. So I've had a shocker there. I had Mateus Cunha in, and then obviously he's decided to lose his head, and he only picked up 2 points. João Pedro, the most frustrating Don when it comes to FPL. Let me tell you this for free. Between him and that guy Welbs, they're most frustrating Donnies when it comes to FPL because you put them in and they drop a stinker. You take them out, they start turning into like flipping Prime R9 and all sorts. So, yeah, that's kind of what I've learned. But João Pedro is like, you know, you're seeing someone and you like the look of and you're like, oh, yeah, go for it. Yeah, I might buy him a drink kind of thing, you know? And then it kind of and you go, oh, shall I, shan't I, shall I get their number, shall I not? That's João Pedro when it comes to FPL. I can't explain it in any other way other than that, but he is so frustrating when it comes to FPL. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is just know which players to kind of look at form of players and look at who they're playing. So you might need to get like your FPL app up and then the Premier League or Flash Scores app or Sky Sports app to look at your fixtures and then sort your team out accordingly. Although I think the midweek round I went full Ranieri, literally changed like half my team because it needed it because I was like, no, I can't do this because the games are too close. I'm going to have to like mix it up a little bit. So yeah, that's kind of the approach I went for. And now I'm hoping towards the end of the season, obviously I will be making some changes at some point, but yeah, that's the biggest thing I've learned. Form and fixtures play a huge part, and João Pedro is an annoyance when it comes to FPL.
So what I've taken from that is whoever you have on the bench is who I need in my starting 11, basically.
Yeah. Well, that was last week. I've obviously made some changes and put some players back in just based off of their fixture. I think Palace have Ipswich and Munoz does like to get forward and he's got quite a few assists this season, so that might be a good player to target from the back line. I can see Nelson looking at me like a proud dad now.
I was going to say, let's talk to the king of FPL.
The expert. Talk to the expert.
Come on, Nelson. Tell us your secrets. What are you planning?
So heading into this game week, I've got 2 free transfers. I think I've got the one, and I'm looking to roll the transfer and keep it for next week. Simply because if anybody plays FPL out there, please keep in mind that game week 29, 4 teams will have blank matches. As in, it was a blank game week. You've got Villa, Liverpool, Newcastle, and Palace. Those 4 teams won't have a game. So as much as you want to make transfers and focus and maybe get big points for game week 28, it might cost you because then you might have like 5 players that are out. And it means that some people can use the chip, I think it's free hit, which allows you to make unlimited transfers for that one game week. And then it resets your team for the next game week. So I haven't used my wild card yet. There's a second wild card that everyone can use. And I think looking at Wes's eyes, I can tell he's saved it for later on in the season, which I think everyone should do because heading towards the last few games of the season, you want to tinker around and get the players that are essentially in form. Southampton and Leicester are always the fixtures to target. I think those are the 2 fixtures you should always target. So this week is a hard one because Salah could be captain or Cole Palmer could be captain against Leicester. So depending, for me, I always look at Salah and think if he gets on very well midweek in the Champions League, then I kind of roll with him for the weekend. If it doesn't really go well, then I kind of then think about, who could I go for and who's a vice captain I could play. Isak was kind of, I think everyone was worried about him playing, and then he played in the FA Cup, so he's back as well. So I think that works for everyone. So I think it's just focusing on the games that could get you the most points. Southampton and Leicester, I think those are the two games that I think you should focus on. And I think I'm going to roll with Salah as captain. Like, he's had an outstanding season, and I'm hoping he gets like a 40 point or something. But it's a hard one because there's 2 blank game weeks, Holly. You're talking game week 29 and also I believe game week 34, where I think there's more teams that will miss out on games. So everyone's got to take that into consideration. Otherwise, you're going to take a massive hit, and you don't want to buy a free transfer, then hit like a -4, -8, and that might hurt you, obviously, moving on to the back end of the season. So that's my tips for heading into this weekend. But have you not wildcarded yet, Holly? Come on, what you doing? What we got going on?
Yeah, I'll just forget to open the app, to be honest with you, and then the game's gone. So, well, never mind. So yeah, maybe next year, I think is the way I'm rolling with it now. I'm quite happy for you two to talk about your tips and stuff. But I don't think
Holly's literally just gone full Del Trotter and gone, this time next year we will be there. And it's like, geez, Holly, you've still got time to turn it round. We're trying to help you here.
Yeah, I know, but you know what I'm like. I say I'll do it, and then it gets to the weekend, and I totally forget that I need to do something. But I know that there's people out there with FPL that are very much in their leagues, whether they've got winner prizes or loser prizes. Now is the time to sort your team out and not be like me. So make sure you follow Wes and Nelson's lead on all things FPL. But you know what, guys? I've actually really enjoyed this evening. Not that I don't enjoy every evening with you guys, but this one's been a good one. So we'll go around the table, say our goodbyes. Nelson, I'll come to you first because I know Wes has got his little outro that I always look forward to hearing. So Nelson, thank you again for joining us tonight. Where can everybody find you doing your thing?
It's been a good one. You can find me on Instagram at nnatumba25. So that's N and then my last name, Natumba25, on Instagram.
Lovely stuff. And now, Wes, I'm going to let you do your thing. It's been a long while since on a Wednesday I've heard this outro, so I'm going to let you far away and go for it.
Well, you see what happens, Holly. You don't get better offers, and we can get to enjoy a nice show. So this is on you, no one else. I'm throwing it out there. It's on you. Anyway, on to the outro. Twitter is at Wezo10, unofficial Moussa Dembele fan account, as everybody knows. Tends to tweet things about the best Belgian to grace Premier League shores, bar none. And then Instagram's at Wezo32. I am at the Spurs Bournemouth game on Sunday. So if anybody does recognise me from anything that I do, please feel free to say hello. I'm usually in and around block 112 before the game, soaking up a little bit of atmosphere, etc. And then for anything football coaching related, it is Kofa MK or at Kickoff Academy across all of the socials. And I sometimes appear on the Park Lane podcast as well on a Sunday at 7:00. So if anybody wants to listen to any ramblings from me on Tottenham in particular, then yeah, feel free to tune in 7:00 on Sundays on the Park Lane podcast.
Business. I love it. Thank you to everybody else that's obviously tuned in tonight, that's going to rewatch this as well. I do love a Wednesday show, and I promise that I will actually be organised and make sure I'm free so we can do this every Wednesday. Like I say, there'll be no watch along tomorrow. I'm not putting myself through it. Instead, I'll do an instant match reaction, and then on Monday we'll be back live for Holly's Hotspurs to obviously go over hopefully a win against Bournemouth, and then fingers crossed the gang are all back together next Wednesday. I will check my calendar. I'm pretty sure we will be. So make sure, if you haven't done so already, please like, subscribe, share, all of that goodness while I figure out where my outro banner is. Because I still don't have a clue how to use this thing. But until next time, and I'm sorry, Nelson, go on you Spurs.
Go on you Spurs.